I'd like to tell you the story of what happened when I had my first alcoholic drink in 2 years. In October 2022, my wife Kirsty turned 40, and to celebrate the occasion, we had 3 child-free nights away at a hotel in Bath Spa. Before the occasion, I decided that for the first time in 2 years, I was going to have an alcoholic drink to celebrate with her. Not that I really think she cares or minds whether I drink alcohol or not, but I just thought it would be a nice experience to share. I did wonder whether this would be a reintroduction to me drinking alcohol again. Sunday 16th of October, we had a very leisurely day, and then 1 hour before dinner, we opened a bottle of red wine. I remember taking my first sip, my first consumption of alcohol for 2 years, and it was quite nice. The first glass went down well, second glass of wine also went down well. By this point, I could tell that I'd had a drink. I'd reached that phase where you kind of appreciate the initial buzz from alcohol as it starts circulating around your body. That initial buzz that you never quite recapture with subsequent drinks, but keep chasing regardless. Over dinner, I had a bottle of beer, so my total alcohol consumption for the evening was half a bottle of red wine and less than 1 pint of beer. That is about 6 or 7 units of alcohol. Now, I don't know whether it was because I hadn't drunk alcohol for a long time, but for the rest of the evening, I just felt out of sorts. I wasn't drunk, I hadn't eaten too much, something just wasn't right. I was agitated and uncomfortable. I couldn't relax, and that night I slept really badly. The next day, I was fine. A little bit tired, certainly not hungover, but my feelings of being out of sorts had passed. I put it down to alcohol just not agreeing with me. Now, the really interesting thing is that my Garmin watch, which I wear all the time, measures and tracks all of my activities, including sleep, step count, heart rate, and stress levels. It measures stress levels by determining your heart rate variability, the interval between each heartbeat. Less variability between each heartbeat equals higher stress levels, whilst an increase in variability means less stress. Typically, my stress levels on an average day are about 30 overall out of 100. This is the week leading up to Kirsty's 40th birthday, and according to Garmin, this indicates a low to moderate level of stress, about normal. On the day that I had my first alcoholic drink in over 2 years, my stress levels rose to 58. Which according to Garmin indicates a high stress level. The 16th of October 2022 was the day that I drank alcohol for the first time in 2 years. Not only was it the most stressful day that I had that month, it also turned out to be the most stressful day I had throughout the whole of 2022. And this correlates with how I felt. Increased heart rate, feeling of something not being quite right, bad sleep and mild anxiety, perspiration. The data in front of me is quite stark. Whilst initially alcohol may be a depressant for me, very soon after consuming it, even in small quantities, it evidently fuels my anxiety. Going back 2 years previously, my decision to stop drinking in the first place was because a mild consumption of alcohol had triggered my first ever panic attack. 2 years of abstinence has changed absolutely nothing. Clearly, my body just reacts in a very negative way to consuming alcohol. This whole experience around my wife's 40th birthday has just confirmed what I'd already suspected. I just need to live without it. And for the last 2 years, I have been living without alcohol and things have been easier and infinitely better. My decision to stop drinking alcohol was partly inspired by a series of individuals that I met through the organisation 1 Year No Beer. I was making a series of testimonial films about these people who totally transformed their lives after quitting drinking.
It's just changed my life and it's changed my kids' lives as well.
And it's quite hard not to be inspired by stories such as this. And I think meeting these people and the experience of making these films really planted the idea in my mind that perhaps my life would also be better if I stopped drinking alcohol. I do stand by the claim that alcohol hasn't changed my life. I think this is a phrase that gets bandied around YouTube way too much. There are, of course, many benefits to it, but for someone like me, who never really had a problem with alcohol before deciding to quit, it hasn't transformed my life in the same way that it has done for some of the people that I met through 1 Year No Beer, for example, who would openly admit that they had a problem with alcohol before they decided to quit. A life without alcohol is not without its problems, however. I never proudly announce that I'm a non-drinker. This might seem slightly ironic given that I've now made 2 YouTube videos about this very subject, but it's not something that I like admitting to people. Inevitably, when you tell people that you don't drink, they'll just assume that you have a problem with it, especially if they know you as someone who used to drink. Alcohol is so widely accepted as the social norm that it's very unusual if you you don't drink. Try finding a greetings card that doesn't have an alcoholic drink on it. I really don't like having that conversation with people where I tell them I don't drink. I feel like I have to justify my decision every time. Recently, I was called a spoilsport for declining a glass of champagne. I genuinely don't understand why what I choose to consume or not consume would have any bearing on someone else's enjoyment of an occasion, but apparently it does. But these are very minor drawbacks to what is otherwise an overwhelmingly positive habit. If you've seen any of my other videos, you may know that I credit running with being one of the most transformative habits of my life. And it was not something that I started doing until I turned 40. I don't always enjoy the run, but I do like how it makes me feel afterwards. I almost consider running to be like a super habit, as it's the foundation of my health, fitness, and happiness, and it has so many positive knock-on consequences. If I've burnt 700 calories doing a 10-kilometer run, I don't want to neutralize this calorie deficit by inhaling 2 donuts. Running makes me eat better and sleep better, and we all know that the 3 pillars of a healthy and happy life are diet, exercise, and sleep. I mention this because giving up alcohol makes it much easier for me to go running. It makes it much more likely that I'll put my shoes on, and it makes it much easier when I am running, as I'm not carrying excess weight due to alcohol consumption. After 2 years of abstinence, I really consider not drinking to be one of the key positive habits that I have in my life. And the more of these positive habits that I have, the more likely it is that I'll continue making better and healthier choices. Up until the experience of my wife's 40th birthday, where the data confirmed to me that alcohol was indeed having a negative physical effect on my body, for a long time I had been thinking that maybe I should try drinking in moderation as opposed to completely abstaining. This may work for some people, but I can assure you abstinence is far easier than moderation. Abstinence can be an intimidating word, but for me it's far easier to stop drinking altogether than it is trying to control it. This year my New Year's resolution was to make decisions quicker, largely because I'm an overthinker. I don't take decisions lightly, and I like to spend time weighing up my options. But this leads to decision fatigue. In psychology, decision fatigue refers to the deteriorating quality of decisions made by an individual after a long session of decision making. Decision fatigue leads to making poor choices. It's why, famously, Barack Obama, Steve Jobs, and Mark Zuckerberg have been known to reduce their clothing choices to 1 or 2 outfits in order to limit the number of decisions they make in a day. Abstaining from alcohol completely is far easier than fighting a battle with moderation. If you're moderating, you're always having to make decisions about whether you will drink, how much you'll drink, how you might try to ensure you don't drink more than you want to. These constant decisions will lead to rapid decision fatigue. Alcohol weakens your willpower and impairs your judgment, making moderation even harder. Abstinence removes all of this decision fatigue. It's why I've also completely stopped my one true vice, drinking Diet Coke. Cutting it out entirely is so much easier than trying to have just the occasional glass. In his book, The Good Drinker, broadcaster and author Adrian Chiles talks about an encounter with a freelance journalist called Marissa, who was trying to moderate her alcohol consumption. Marissa pointed out that drinking moderately, part of which involves thinking about the consequences of drinking too much, is counter to the advice we hear these days about the importance of living in the moment and having that feeling of complete freedom in life. It's a feeling that I could totally connect with, particularly times in my life when I was a student or in my early 20s, where there was a feeling of being carefree on a night out. You could meet anyone, go anywhere, and there was all this excitement. And it was all about being present. Drinking moderately or abstaining completely is about not being in the present, because you're having to recognize how you're going to feel in the future. I miss that feeling of being alive, that feeling that anything could happen tonight. But given my experiences with alcohol and my 44 years on this earth, I've come to realize that for me, happiness comes from sacrificing the life you want to live right now for the life you want to live later. As the actor Sean Patrick Flannery said, "Do something today that your future self will thank you for."